This is Space Cat's Peace Turtles, the unofficial podcast for Fantasy Flight's Twilight Imperium. Episode 83,
The future of the show.
Music by Ben Prunty, featuring Matt Martins and Hunter Donaldson.
If we ever had a giant shareholders meeting
Right.
for Space Cat's Peace Turtles, what would
be our celebrity guest?
Yeah, oh, that's a good question. Who would play the Space Cat's Peace Turtles like concert, shareholders meeting concert?
Sure.
Because it's always somebody really lame that like is worth a lot of money but is well past their prime. Not to like make any enemies here, but I remember like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, Walmart had their big shareholders meeting in Arkansas, which is of course where we're from, and they had Will Smith perform. Now, I'm not saying that Will Smith
Isn't great.
yeah, or that he's not a talented man, but this was like 4 years ago, and it was. It just seemed odd.
It was a weird time
like,
for him.
It just seemed like Will Smith on the Venn diagram of how expensive is he to how thirsty is he to put on a good show was at a very weird place in that Venn diagram, in that he was probably very expensive and probably had not done a show in a long time, nor really had anything to lose.
It's sort of like how, you know how for the past, I don't even know how many years, the only thing I know that Jay Moore has done is Blizzard convention, like Blizzard shareholders meetings.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know that he did that. That's ridiculous.
That's the only thing I know about Jay Moore doing for like literally the past maybe 5 to 10 years.
Right. Yeah. I remember him hosting Last Comic Standing, and then that's it. That's the last time I ever saw him. So this is a very weird way to start this episode, but I think both me and you are kind of nervous.
Yeah, I'm scared.
Which is kind of a different energy for us to I don't think we've been nervous doing this show for a while.
Yeah.
But we kind of have a lot of big. I mean, this episode probably will not be very long. I'm going to go ahead and apologize for that. Or actually, we say that, but like a lot of times we think an episode is going to be really short, and then it ends up being
for an hour and a half.
Very, 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 very long. But yeah, so I feel like it's maybe I don't know. Like I just think me and Matt have kind of reached a point where we've been talking about what is this show? Where's this show headed? Like what? Yep. What is this show ever going to change, or are we going to talk about? I mean, I think the question that was on, I say a lot of people's tongues, but I think in reality it was probably like 3 people.
Yeah.
When we started this show was, how are you gonna do a show about a single board game
forever?
And that's it, and that's all. And I don't want to.
So far,
yeah,
we've done it by changing up. We do what we call arcs, essentially. We don't like mean to do arcs, but we kind of fall into new arcs every so often.
Yes,
right.
Yes. So the show overall takes a focus that has to do with the board game. Obviously, I mean everything is through the lens of this one board game, Twilight Imperium, but the show's overall focus as far as energy has been pointed at various topics. And, you know, there was the tournament, there was, before that,
strategy
just
guides.
Yeah, in general. And so I don't know if you guys have noticed, but we've been in an in-between season for a minute now.
Every time we're in between, we lean into stuff like Galactic Council. I've noticed there's certain things that we like know work well.
Right.
You know, certain doing Space Kitty episodes works. Doing Galactic Council episodes works. Finding components we haven't covered yet and like let's completely look at that like on its own and break it down. Little breakdowns like that work. But in terms of what was like the next new big wave of episodes really gonna be, it's taken some time to kind of figure out where exactly we want to go in that direction. Just because we want to, every arc that we've done so far has been something we're very, very excited to do. So we need to make sure whatever we were doing is that next thing that we're very excited to do. So we've been brainstorming a lot of like, what are we most enjoying doing right now, and that we can keep pushing that forward.
Yeah. And I think we should start maybe of all the things we could talk about as far as where the show is headed next, I think we should talk with the thing that I feel like you as the listener are going to be most comfortable with, which is also something that we've teased for a while. It is time to revisit the 17 factions of Twilight Imperium and get a kind of final word as far as this show is concerned about each of the factions. I think our first round strategy guides were overall a successful project that had a lot of misfires, and there were lots of things that made it into the episodes that were not perfect.
Right. They're defined by the fact that we were learning the game as we went with them.
Yes.
So the early guides, we understood more about the entirety of the game later on than we did in the early episodes. In the early episodes, I would say it's like, how do you know exactly how Xcha works when we hadn't even like fully realized the power of soul and infantry in general, right? It took the soul episode for us to be like, oh, whoa, wait, we've just completely like cracked the code for ourselves on infantry. That makes us have to reevaluate the importance of Arborek and Xcha and lots of things like that. Like, so all these things were we were redefining these factions with each new guide. And now that we've done all the guides, and now that we've done a tournament where we've seen many other people play as them, we want to revisit those guides with all of that information in tow. But the biggest thing for that means we want it to be very comprehensive, right?
Yes.
These guides are meant to be, like you were saying, the final word. We're really excited to dig super deep into these factions and have an episode that is a resource for everyone in perpetuity, right? Like, it's just like, you should be able to listen to our guide and there should be nothing left unsaid.
Well, and also I kind of want to make a distinction that I think if we could redo that arc of if I could literally step into a time machine and go back to when we started doing the strategy guides, what I would have labeled them as instead of first round strategy guides, that eventually the idea of focusing so much on the first round, I feel like has become a bit of a misnomer. In that its importance, I think, has less to do with the specific faction that you have and more to do with the situation you find yourself in. And those things are not very easily fit into a strategy guide. But if I could have relabeled those, I think I would have called them beginner's guides, because we were basically beginners with these factions, trying to play them each a lot, get a good kind of general overview, and deliver that to you in the show. And when I say beginner, I'm not trying to say that we labored over those. We labored over them so much, but there is no way for Twilight Imperium to come out and us be able to have done what we did without it being somewhat general and not 100% accurate. But now we've had a lot of time with this game, and better than that, the audience has given us a lot of perspective on this game and how it functions and how the factions all work together and what it looks like to play this game at a very, very high level. And what we want to do is just communicate that to you.
Right. And it's also not just about the highest level, right? It's the fact that we've seen many different players from all different skill levels and different styles play these factions. And so now we have a better idea of how to look at them. When we were doing the original guides, we were basically doing them from our own perspective. And that's all we could honestly offer was this is, we Hunter and I split up the factions based on knowing our own play styles and preferences, and that's what those guides were written based on. Was like, I know I'm gonna like a Mentak thing, and I can kind of already write the guide without having played them. Playing them just helps me reinforce some points. Now it's more about how should Mentac work for everyone? If you are wanting to try out Mentac, what are all the things you should know from the beginner level to the expert level, and just everything in between is the kind of stuff I'm gonna want to touch on in these guides. It's just sort of like super comprehensive, cover everything, cover all the bases, and be able to offer up that like, here is the expert take on each faction.
Right. But at the same time, I think that the process of doing that is it's going to take a lot of time. I mean, I think we're talking about an arc of the show that will take probably longer than it took for us to do the original guides, because our plan this time is to take our time with them, which kind of leads to a problem of, well, if the show is only going to have these big strategy guide drops, like, not there were times when we did it the first time that you would get several strategy guides in a month. I don't even know how we did that, but we did do that. And I think that's actually the reason that it's like that is now us having to be like, well, we probably need to go fix a lot of things because we were pushing out too many strategy guides too quickly. But I want this show to still have a feeling of discovery and of newness to it. I don't want us to just retread old ground for the next year. So what is that? There has to be some sort of, I think, compromise that we can kind of make and kind of give you both a in-depth, very developed look at a game that we all know and love and understand, but also give you something new.
Yeah, and that's kind of the big leap that's what's made us nervous at the beginning of this episode, is we want to start bringing up the idea of what could the next board game be for Space Cats, Peace Turtles,
right?
And that's not to say out with the old and in with the new. That's to say, the way I think about it in my mind is I look at the TI content we want to keep doing as like, I want it to be of the highest caliber we can possibly do, and even if it's not a strategy guide, all of it I want to be really, really sat down and thought out. But like Hunter's saying, there still needs to be some discovery. We're not discovering TI anymore. And that's why a new game feels important to us, so that we can do both, right? We want this show to start taking on the air of like, you're going to get really expert level TI stuff while also learning a new game maybe with us.
Right.
And us offering the same thing we offered in the first 6 months to a year of this show with TI, which is us getting the first times we're getting to play it and working through everything and seeing what works and what doesn't, and being wrong sometimes and having ourselves be corrected and finding common ground with the listenership to then all come together and reach a higher understanding of a game.
If you think about what makes this show special to us, and what makes it different from other shows, is that we are like a fan show. We are a show that loves this one board game, and we are a deep dive show. We're not like we're not two guys sitting around pretending that we're like journalists talking critically about game after game, just trying to get you to buy stuff or be interested. And I'm making it sound like those shows are bad. They're not bad, but we are doing something different.
Right.
And I think that what we're doing can be expanded to cover more ground.
Yeah. That's what excites me the most about this thought is that's what we've routinely enjoyed about our own show and have been told by others is what they enjoy about it, is that we really dig deep into the game, because that's why we play strategy games at the end of the day, right? Is not to just have a glancing blow at the game and be like, oh, that seemed like it was cool strategy. It's like, no. When people play these big strategy games is because they want to sit there and think about it for days before the game even starts, and then they want to play the game on a Saturday. When they finished it, they want to think about what they did right and what they did wrong and revisit it and apply all of that to next time they play. That's
Right.
the type of players Hunter and I are like, we like to play one game over and over and over again until we really feel like we get it. And so that's why we want the show to go in that direction, is we want to just do that same thing again with diving deep into a new game and put the Space Cats Peace Turtles style onto something new and kind of broaden our own horizons a bit and hopefully bring in new people. I mean, if we bring in a new game, there's going to be fans that we haven't ever talked to that they're going to be able to offer us a lot of advice and opinion that is going to be important to have.
I think there is kind of a culture of strategy games that I feel like does not only have to do with Twilight Imperium, but has to do with games that have a high level of complexity, that are very rewarding to play over time, that basically no one is equipped to cover them properly. I mean, like, think about an outlet like Shut Up and Sit Down, who me and Matt have name dropped on the show pretty frequently. Yeah. I think we're both very big fans and have been a huge inspiration to us. But I think part of the reason that we started this show was that their format is, let's talk about this game for a minute. And by a minute, I mean literally 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and then we're done. And we were just kind of like, with Twilight Imperium, it was like, there's just got to be more to say about it. Right. And turns out there was
a lot.
83 hours. And that's actually a very low estimate. It would be more like 160 hours probably of stuff to say about Twilight Imperium. But Twilight Imperium is not alone in this in this quality. And I think from talking to a lot of the people that listen to the show, we've learned that there are a lot of games that kind of fit this bill. Now, that does not mean that we are taking it. I think the thing that me and Matt are both very nervous about is the big question right now at this point is, what is that game going to be?
We don't know.
we don't know. And essentially what I'm trying to say is that from now on, the show will maybe have multiple arcs going at once. One of those arcs that we're committing to right now today is a fresh look at all 17 factions of Twilight Imperium 4th edition, where we try and really sum things up and give a very hard developed look, a last round strategy guide, if you will.
Right.
And then the other commitment is to have an arc of the show where we are looking at a new game and giving you a kind of beginner's guide to that game. We're not going to pick up a new game and just pretend that we're experts in it, because that won't really be the case.
Right.
I feel like it's now time for us to maybe talk about the Patreon. Like, what
does this stuff mean?
Yeah, what does this mean in and all of a sudden it became an interview where I'm asking you a question.
Yeah.
But Matt, if you could tell us what does this have to do with the Patreon? How is this all going to be integrated together? At this point, people are, involved in our Patreon, and they understand that yields certain benefits that all have to do with Twilight Imperium. So if the show includes anything besides Twilight Imperium, what does that mean?
Well, what's great about it, and what's honestly the most exciting part of it, is that it only widens the scope of the Patreon, and it gives you more things that you can do. So if we want to, we can even break down kind of what all the different roles of the Patreon are going to do. But more than anything, the idea of the Patreon now is helping cultivate what topics of TI we want to talk about, but also cultivating what game we're going to play and what topics in that game are we going to cover.
And I think we should be specific here at this point and say that starting in June and going through July, if you are a part of our Patreon, or if you are joining the Patreon for the first time, regardless of what level you're at, if you're a dollar donor or all the way up to Space Kitty, you will get to vote in a poll determining what the new game will be that we are going to add to the first game that we actually add to the Space Cats repertoire. We don't even know if we'll ever do it again. You know what I mean? For all we know, we're scared right now because we're afraid you're all going to be like, oh, well, we hate this idea. We don't want you to talk about anything but Twilight Imperium. But like, we've gotten plenty of messages over the past that people say they wish we would talk about more games. So I feel pretty confident that I think you'll all be excited to vote on this. And so if you're a part of the Patreon or want to join the Patreon in June or July to get in on this, you can help determine the future of the show and determine what game we start embarking on next. Right. And then the current games we have as options for this poll, me and Matt talked about this for a while, and we have been influenced by a lot of things that other people have said. There's kind of a very general logic to each of our choices. But I think you'll be pleased with the overall result. Here, I'll just get to it. So our first option kind of stays in the Fantasy Flight family of games and is something that we just hear a lot of people talk about all the time. And it's something that me and Matt have experience playing, but we have not played this particular version of the game. And that would be the Game of Thrones board game, Mother of Dragons expansion. Specifically that setup of the game. Yeah. If you don't know, it was an expansion that released last year, and it ups the player count to 8, but it also like pretty fundamentally changed the game to become even more like TI. I mean, it introduced originally in Game of Thrones board game, you had influence that worked sort of like trade goods, except for you couldn't actually trade them. You just gained them and then could use them for different things. But Mother of Dragons allows you to trade these things. So now there's like this whole economy of the game that never existed before. And it just expanded the scope of the game. And we thought about just doing Game of Thrones, the board game, but like that's an old game. Mother of Dragons is the hot new item, and we want to play it. we really would like to play that game. So why not just go ahead and jump right into it and treat that like the new norm? And it's interesting to be throwing this out, just like 2 days after Game of Thrones, the show, has ended. Yeah. But I think the idea here is if you liked the show, fun. Well, listen to us play with plastic and pretend more of the show. And if you didn't like it, well, the board game's more based off the books anyway. So there you go. It'll be a show completely dedicated to me reinvesting my time and energy away from the show and into the books and just pretending that some things never happened. Right. And in a way, on an emotional level, this will be the most difficult choice for Matt if you choose this one. So obviously it's my favorite choice. Matt, what is our second choice for the second one is one I'm super interested in, but neither of us have ever touched it or hardly know anything about it beyond the basic concept of it. But I am very, very interested in hearing more and trying out the game Root, which came out pretty it's a pretty new game, and I think there's maybe one expansion that got released shortly after. But regardless, Root is like a asymmetrical game where every faction is vastly different, way more than even in TI. TI, you have some different abilities, but in Root, your goals for the game differ depending on which faction you're playing, and what the way you play the game changes based on what faction you're playing. And that just seems ripe for the kind of stuff Hunter and I like looking into. I mean, the idea of doing faction guides for something like Root is just... It blows my mind what would be possible, because you have to completely, with each faction guide, you're basically talking about a new game that you have to analyze and restructure your thinking around, which just sounds very, very fun to me. It's also an adorable game, and I would love to live in that little world for quite a while. Yeah, I love the art style of the game. I feel like this spot for me on the poll just represents a game that I know almost nothing about, honestly. Yeah. It would be true discovery. Yeah. So this one is, I think, the risky play that I think if a lot of you out there listening to this already love this game, then maybe this is the right one. Honestly, this is the scariest one for me, because I know really is that I love the art style and I love everything I've heard about it, but I have not touched it and I have not seen it in person, which is wild.
It would be the biggest jump for us to get into that one. It's almost the opposite of Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, out of everything else on our list, we've played a decent amount of Game of Thrones. Myself especially, I played a lot of Game of Thrones for a while. So that would not be a hard thing to transition into at all. Root would be quite a jump for us, but one that excites me to try.
Yeah, I think this is the wild pick, and I mean, obviously, I'm excited with everything we've put out here as an option, and I will probably be excited pretty much for to add anything to the ecosystem of this show. But this one seems like the most ambitious pick. I want to go ahead and talk about the next one. We wanted, I'll talk about the logic of this next pick first before I even announce what it is, but we wanted there to be an option of a game that was classic, that was not the hot new thing, that was something that people play and have been playing and will be playing for hundreds of years. And that's quite a bold statement when I think about it. But anyways, we decided to throw diplomacy on the list.
Diplomacy is interesting to me because, like you're saying, it's classic, which means we would be stepping in as little babies.
Yes,
into this.
It would truly be a beginner's guide.
Diplomacy.
Yeah,
they would be crushing us. This would be where the errata is like 3/4 of every single episode, because we would say things and then we would get millions of messages because we have millions of people listening, right? No, but we have lots of people that would be getting back to us like, hey, you're completely dead wrong. And I know because I've been playing diplomacy since the 80s, you idiot. So this is the one I'm probably the most afraid of, just from a social aspect and like what it will do to my ego.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think diplomacy is very well trod ground, and yeah, we will definitely have to lean on us being like, well, I mean, we are podcasters, you know what I mean? We're podcasters first, diplomacy experts fourth. So yeah, I mean, I think diplomacy, of all the like kind of classic games, I think this is the one that most excites me. I played diplomacy a lot in high school. I say a lot, I just mean like a handful of times, and always really, really loved it. And it also has connections to Game of Thrones. And I mean, I think that this would be a very intimidating choice, sort of like how Root was, but for very different reasons, being that we are going to be children. But this is the game.
What I enjoy about that is the sort of secret to Space Cats has always been the errata portion of it.
Of course.
And and when we're doing guides, it's not like we're even pulling all of our information out of nowhere. We're reading Reddit threads, we're reading Board Game Geek threads, we're building our opinion based on what people are saying, in addition to playing and developing our own opinions. With diplomacy, that just means there's essays upon forum. I mean, there's just so much material out there for us to digest. This would become like we would have homework every week to sit down and research and learn things about diplomacy that have been talked about for a long time. So we would just be inserting ourselves into that conversation.
Right.
Which is what really excites me about the idea of diplomacy.
I think diplomacy would be a very fun one to tackle first outside of Twilight Imperium, because I feel like if we felt like we had a very strong handle on diplomacy, then
we could do anything.
Yeah, we would be wizards basically.
And the last one here is probably the most out of the blue for me, which is Star Trek Ascendancy. And really the only reason we tossed it on the list is because a long time ago we were talking about 3-player games in an episode, and we mentioned just like, what are great 3-player games? Because I just never see games that are like perfect at 3 players. TI is kind of weird at 3 players. Game of Thrones barely works at all at 3 players. What are great 3-player games? And by a huge margin, everybody said Star Trek Ascendancy is awesome at 3 players. And that it's great at all player counts, but like that 3 really does specifically work for it as well. And that has just always intrigued me. So Star Trek Ascendancy since that point has been something I want to play. And want to learn about, because I just think that seems really accessible and good. And it also, hey, space theme, that helps. That's a nice transition.
I think it's the closest to, it's a science fiction game with variable faction abilities. Like it's within the wheelhouse, but it's not Cosmic Encounter. Because
Yeah.
I just don't know how you could make a show about Cosmic Encounter. Honestly, I think Cosmic Encounter would be in that spot if
Yeah.
not for the fact that like you can't. It's
really
impossible. It doesn't. I don't even know how. I mean, I love Cosmic Encounter, but I have no idea how
you
would.
can't develop strategy guides for Cosmic Encounter.
Yeah, I mean, it's like in you developing the strategy is like what the whole game is, because you're just kind of
Right.
as you go, you're like, oh, okay. Like I actually feel like if somebody made a really good show about Cosmic Encounter, they would ruin the game for themselves,
Right.
basically. Completely.
So yeah, instead Star Trek Ascendancy just seems like, and this is also replacing things like Eclipse.
Yeah.
Eclipse is a space game that always gets compared, but Eclipse is a Euro game to me, more or less. I mean, obviously, maybe some Eclipse players would take offense to that, but just Eclipse doesn't strike the same, chords that things like TI does.
Eclipse is kind of in an interesting spot right now of being like in between versions of the game.
That's true.
Otherwise, I think we would probably consider Eclipse.
If second edition was fully out, we would probably be a little bit more willing to tack that on the list.
Yeah, and I'll throw that up to. I realize there's probably a large portion of the audience right now that is like, oh, Eclipse, why not? Do Eclipse. Yeah. It's the most common board game that people relate to Twilight Imperium, but the timing feels wrong. Maybe when this happens again, I don't know, and if it does happen, I mean, honestly, me and Matt right now have absolutely no idea, and I would like everyone to appreciate how scared we are right now in just throwing this out there, which brings me to my next point, which is that there are going to be 5 games on the poll, but we've only listed 4. Me and Matt have curated these 4 to cover ground where we feel like we would probably be happy with any of them. And they all kind of do something different for us and cover a different base. There will be one more game on the poll. Now, this is coming out right now. Actually, this is probably coming out the same.
And then putting it
out. We're recording and then putting this out. So this is, if you're listening to this like the second it dropped, this is real fresh. And what I need you to do is get on our Discord right now and
screaming.
And start screaming and telling us what game belongs in this 5th spot. Right. Even though it might seem kind of silly to like, oh, we're doing like a big poll, and then we're also like doing a poll for a game to put on the poll. Sounds like that game to put on the poll might win because people already voted for it. Yeah. Regardless, what I'm trying to say is, in this small amount of time you have before June 1st, if you get on the internet and yell at us in the myriad of ways that you can, we will take that into consideration. All you have to do is throw out your game. If it's a game that there's no way we would ever do it, we won't even say anything. We'll just politely just like kind of not deal with it. But I want to know what you guys think. I want to know what game you all feel belongs on this poll, basically.
Yeah. I mean, really, it just comes down to like, what is your other favorite strategy game, and plead the case. Tell us why it's your favorite, and let us know why we should start covering it. But so the last kind of thing then to cover with all this is, by the end of this process, we'll have a new game, and I want to dig a little bit pretty quickly deeper into what the Patreon looks like with this new game being a part of it. And this is something we'll learn more about over time as we discover our new game. But let's just quickly go over the levels and hit up what each one's doing. So we've already covered that the Patreoners, our $1 subscribers, are going to be able to vote on that next game during the portion of June and July. What we're also going to start trying to do is we want to start doing Q&As with our patrons. Ideally, once a month or more or whatever, but doing a sit down time where it's just an open discussion, basically open errata, rather than like taking errata questions from Reddit and whatnot and posting them in the next week's episode. We kind of just want to do a time where we can sit down and pick things apart, especially because things like the fact that we're spacing out these updated guides for TI means like getting really, really specific information on TI might be a little bit more spaced out than normal. And we don't want anyone to feel like they're missing out on their weekly dose or whatever. So being able to jump on a Q&A and be like, hey, it sounds like you guys are working on the Nalu guide. How's it going? And we'll talk about that in the Q&A sessions. That's something that Hunter and I really want to start doing. The Galactic.
I also think of those Q&A episodes as an opportunity for us to get a little off-topic-y.
Yeah.
And like if you're just interested in hearing us talk about whatever, that I think is an opportunity to start sort of introducing that into the ecosystem of this project, basically.
Yeah. Next up is the Galactic Council, $5. And this has always been you vote on episode topics, right? And that's not going to change, more or less. It'll widen. It can widen to the new game. We'll start putting out ideas for episodes for the new game. But the Galactic Council has always been best at giving us ideas for these special topics.
Yes.
The expansion wish list was a special was a Galactic Council. Action cards was a Galactic Council thing. Doing the unit, like fleet composition episode, that was a Galactic Council ideas. And those have always been really great episodes. And so we want to just keep doing that because the Galactic Council is always really good at finding something that is something Hunter and I maybe haven't thought of talking about because either it seems rudimentary. I think there's been a number of episodes that when we first had the idea, we were like, I don't know what we're supposed to say about that. And then as we develop it, it's like, oh wow, there's a lot that we can talk about with that. And it always takes that reminder from the Galactic Council of like, there are topics that are worth breaking down at a smaller scale. So we're going to keep doing that, but we're going to extend it to whatever the new game is as well.
Right. So it'll be all about, if you're a Galactic Counselor, you're voting, and then also proposing new supplementary episodes, basically, to go along with Twilight Imperium as we have been, but also whatever the new game is. So I mean, and I think if the Galactic Council is feeling, so essentially the Galactic Council episode every month will be an optional, like it could be another Twilight Imperium thing. Like you guys will get to kind of drive that boat as far as like how much you want this to stay about being about Twilight Imperium every single month, and how much you're interested in new things, new topics. So I mean that part is still very much up to you guys, and that ideally will continue to be one episode per month. So
right. And so then next up is the Steve Martin fan club, the often, I won't say overlooked, but we don't stream as often as we put out episodes of the podcast, so it's always been a weird thing with the Steve Martin fan club, and I think they're the ones that are getting the most out of this change. I think this improves the Steve Martin fan club a lot because we still want to keep you a part of our streaming side of things, but now we look at Steve Martin fan club suggestions as like, we'll play anything on stream at this point. We just want to be streaming more often, and we'll stream TI games, we'll stream the new game, but then we'll also just take suggestions, and it can be literally anything. If you want a night of a stream of One Night Werewolf, I'll do that. Like I'll jump all over that, and it can just literally be anything. So I think this gives the Steve Martin fan club a lot of opportunities to suggest new games and help us learn about all kinds of other games. And if anything, this is the broadest. Or, well, there's one, the Space Kitties we'll get to, and that's probably the broadest. But Steve Martin Fan Club is a much wider net now to catch content with.
Yeah, I think I want the Steve Martin Fan Club to feel more like you are all just producers for our Twitch channel, in that if you want to see something on our Space Cats Peace Turtles Twitch channel, then we're going to do that. And I think we have... it's definitely the one that we have kind of neglected the most. But I want to get back on the schedule of giving the Steve Martin Fan Club a stream every month. Now that means, like this month, for example, there will be a stream, which we should probably talk about a little bit. But it's not necessarily a Steve Martin Fan Club stream, which I feel like is a little bit cheating. And I don't want to do that in the future. What I want to do is start giving the fan club more specific say as to what it is that we're doing with the channel. Definitely.
So the next tier is the Good Yin Brotherhood. The Good Yin Brotherhood is more or less the same, except for doubled in scope, right? The GYB doesn't quite apply to anything. We'll play any game with you, because we always see the Good Yin Brotherhood as sort of like where we get to workshop stuff. If I'm working on a Nalu guide, I'm gonna play some GYB games and work on Nalu. and this will extend to whatever the new game is. So
Right.
the Gideon Brotherhood will be a mixture of, do you want to play a TI game or do you guys want to get in on a game of the new game? And we'll kind of bounce a little bit back and forth between that depending on what all the different Gideon Brotherhood members want to do.
Right.
And finally is the Space Kitties, and this is where I guess things just get kind of crazy because our philosophy with the Space Kitties has always been you're co-producers. You are a producer of an episode. And for a while, that's been like, what topic of TI do you want to talk about? But now that we're kind of expanding the reach to some new games, I think we both see Space Kitties as kind of like, hey, I don't care. Do whatever you want. It's your time to shine.
Right.
Give it to us. Give us, whatever you want to do, and we'll do it.
Yeah, I think that the Space Kitty part of the show, like I feel like I have a lot of faith and trust with the Space Kitties we've had thus far. I really appreciate all of them, and I feel like it's time to just kind of take all the training wheels off of that and just be like, whatever you think makes sense for this show, let's do that. Like, let's, and I mean, we've just had such a good experience, like working with the Space Kitties on their episodes as well. And not like it's just been a good, like, creative process to where I feel like if it feels right for the show, let's just do it. Like we don't need to put any restrictions on it. So I think that's from now on will be the philosophy with the Space Kitty episodes.
Yeah. So speaking of that, and speaking of streams, next week's episode, as well as this coming Saturday's stream, is gonna be a kind of a prelude. The stream is gonna be sort of a prelude to a Space Kitty episode. Yin for Life has had this project kind of in the mill for a while, and we are going to play a game next week, and we're planning to stream it. There's kind of there are details that have to be worked out of exactly the structure of the stream, but the game will be streamed, and then the episode that follows that stream will be talking about that game.
Right.
And Hunter, do you want to talk a little bit about what the game is and why all of this had to happen to us?
Well, I'll talk about it on an emotional level. So Space Kitty Yin for Life basically wanted to kind of craft a nightmare scenario for me as a Twilight Imperium player, in which we are going to play a 4-player game, my least favorite player count, and I have to play as the Muat. Now, those two things alone would be enough to have it be a bad day, but we are also going to be playing on a bogus map designed by Billy, and I don't even know what it is yet. In fact, I'm told I won't get to see it until shortly before the game starts.
Right.
So that's fun.
And the worst fact of all is not only are we trapped in this nightmare scenario, we're trapped in it for a 14-point game instead of a 10-point game.
Yes.
So we have to endure that many more hours or whatever it ends up being of this social experiment Yin for Life is putting us through. So if you want to see that, which you do, I'll tell you that much. That's going to be this Saturday. We are starting at 11, so hopefully the stream starts at roughly 11 or 11:30. There might be a little bit of setup time, but we're kicking the game off at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time.
Right. I still don't know what I'm going to do for this game as far as like what am I going to lean into or not. I really, really never wanted to play the Muat ever again after playing them, I think 5 or 6 times in a row. And putting together the episode about the Muat was some of the most stressful, creative feelings I've ever had in my life. So this is one way to spend your money, I guess. And it's going to be, I mean, I hope you can hear the non-comedic, like, feelings of stress and not wanting to do this.
You know what's hilarious about this is we are announcing this stream and this episode immediately after saying, like, let's widen what Space Kitties do. Let's let them find even more ways to make our lives absolutely miserable. Let's let it make them just as involved as they can.
Well, I actually think it's remarkable that we've gotten this far into the Space Kitty practice without there being an episode before this like this. So I am very comfortable with this as an episode. And I think the episode has been designed very smartly by Yin for Life to just be a nightmare for me. So I respect it, but I'm not going to lie to you. I am not looking forward to it. But it is like, it's like if Jigsaw paid attention to your life and designed a trap for you specifically. Like, you'd be like, oh no, I'm about to die because Jigsaw got me. But you'd also kind of be like, wow, Jigsaw put a lot of thought into this. This is like,
you really nailed it.
This was all handmade.
Personality and
right.
I appreciate him just knowing what I really felt about some things.
Right. And you just be like, wow, I get the metaphor here. This is fantastic. Also, I really wish we had led the episode with this. We probably need to try and lead every episode with this up until GenCon. But our live episode is available and there's still tickets.
Yeah.
We had a lot of people pick up tickets on that first day. But if you are going to GenCon and you are hearing the sound of my voice, please come to our live episode. There are still plenty of tickets available. It's going to be a very good time. It's going to be a funny, goofy episode, and we have such a special thing planned. I forget if we have actually announced it yet.
No, we haven't.
Is it time to do that?
Ooh. I'm afraid of announcing it because there's so much work that has to go into it. I guess we could.
So let's do it.
All right, go for it. You clearly want to.
I want to. I think it's time to announce what it's going to be, especially because people have tickets to it, and also I want more people to get tickets to it. I want as many people to see it live as possible. We are going to play. Let me start like this. Through an anonymous listener. That I think you will probably be able to figure out if you think about it for a minute. We were able to get a hold of a copy of the infamous and much maligned Twilight Imperium RPG that Fantasy Flight published and then very quickly tried to sweep under the rug. And we are going to play that for an episode. We are going to play the very bad, not good Twilight Imperium RPG.
Yeah.
And I could not be more happy about that.
Yeah, we're going to have some friend guests on the show, some people joining us to be a part of that. Some very funny people will be joining us. And yeah, it's going to be really stupid. And I'm very excited for how stupid it's going to be.
Yeah. If there's more you'd like to know about this RPG, it was featured in the Shut Up and Sit Down Twilight Imperium documentary called Space Lions, and also Jada Pake's special faction is based off of a piece of art that is in the Twilight Imperium RPG book. So if you've been looking at Jada's faction, the Savages of Simia, then that art is from the RPG, and it was specifically called out for being crappy. And then Jada Pake went and made a custom faction out of it. So there you go.
Yeah, I'm super pumped. I'm super pumped for the future of the show. I'm pumped for Gen Con. There's a lot going on just this summer in general and going into, the rest of 2019. So if you're excited for all the things that are to come, please rate us on your podcast app of choice, on iTunes, Apple Podcasts. A 5-star rating goes a long way for visibility for us, and we would much appreciate it. You can follow us on Twitter at SpaceCatsPod. You can find us on Space Cats, Peace Turtles on Facebook. You can find us every week with our posts on the Twilight Imperium subreddit. You can also join our Patreon to start getting in on these new changes in the show. You can join our Discord to be a part of the conversations about what our next game is going to be. And Hunter Donaldson,
Oh, yeah. So check me out. If you like stand-up comedy and you like me and you live in Portland, Oregon, please come to Earthquake Hurricane, which is every single Thursday at 8 p.m. At Ford Food and Drink. You can also see me now every Sunday at Alberta Street Pub, hosting a show currently called The Alliance, but it will probably change to a new name now that I am moving in on this new show. But that is at Alberta Street Pub. That starts at 9:30 every Sunday. And then on May 25th, you can see me at a very, very good show called Becky with the Good Jokes, which is at Funhouse Lounge. And that show starts at 9:30 p.m. And also, I should go ahead and let you all know that I am going to be competing in that dumb comedy contest that I do every single year. So if you haven't been listening to the show that long, this year and every year I try and compete in the Portland's Funniest Person contest, which is at Helium Comedy Club. I will be performing. I want to go ahead and throw it out there, although it's quite a ways away at this point. I will be performing at Helium on Wednesday, June 19th, starting at 7 o'clock. And it is an audience vote preliminary round. So any folks coming out to see me would mean a lot. Obviously, hopefully you like me, so you might be inclined to vote for me. Maybe not. I don't know. Actually, maybe I'm kind of regretting this now already. But that will be at the Helium Comedy Club on Wednesday, June 19th at 7 o'clock. I believe tickets are $10, but if you call ahead of time and drop my name, you can get them for $5.
Yeah, and I want to thank some Space Kitties. I want to thank Jim Bov, Naderade, Patience is a Virtue, Billy, TG Welch, and probably for the last time ever, I'll thank Yin for Life, but I can't imagine that will be the tone after next week of how I treat Yin for Life moving forward. So we'll see how next week goes.
Yeah, Yin for Life, you're in trouble, basically, because you know what? I am really upset about next week and what's going to happen on Saturday. Please tune into our Twitch to see that game because it should be worth something, I guess. But I have never felt more like I want to win a game of Twilight Imperium than the Saturday game. But I know that it is not possible because I am going to, I'll be my worst enemy in that, regardless of whatever Yin does to me or you even. It won't matter because I will be so upset the entire time just even having to play Mua. And with 2 strategy cards, it always just feels so stupid to me that I get 2 strategy cards and that every strategy card gets picked. I will never, ever get over how dumb that makes me feel. It just does. I don't know why. It's because I think it's something... I get so excited when I'm playing Twilight Imperium and I'm like, okay, what strategy card do I want to pick next round? And how do I, kind of plan what else everybody else is going to pick? And a lot of that just doesn't exist.
It just goes out the window.
It just, because I'm like, you're just kind of like, well, everything's going to get picked. So it's really just like, what primary do I need? And also I'm going to get 2. Like the fact that most of the time when I play 4-player, every round I have a strategy card I don't really need. I just have it.
Right.
I'm just like, well,
it's just there in your pocket.
I got diplomacy and it's round 3.
Guess I'll be forced to use that before I'm allowed to pass.
Yeah, I guess I'll have to do that. It's just dumb. And then
what's
now
nice
I gotta...
about this game that we're going to be playing
shut up.
What's
dumb about it is no, you be quiet, okay? I'm already feeling entitled because I got to live through this. Just the fact that I will be playing Muat, which is a faction that I've spent so much time thinking about, like, how do you get it right? How do you do it right? And I can't ever get it right. And so I'm going to be trying to, really thinking about every decision I'm making. But then also I'll just have an extra strategy card. That'll be so, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to be like, oh, I really got to play tight. And then it's like, well, it's round 2 and I have Imperial as well. So...
well,
I guess I'll get that secret objective. Oh, great. I can't score that one either. This is
my punishment for
fun.
Playing in this game is I have the 4th player is unaligned Magi.
Oh, right.
And I just
Yeah, we're
I
not
don't
even
know
playing.
what are we supposed to do?
I don't know. You know what? Actually, I just decided. I think the goal is for me to get eliminated. That is. It's either gonna be I play my heart out, like really put my heart and soul and blood and sweat and tears, or I just get eliminated.
Yeah, just give it all up.
Yeah, and I hope Magi will have the resources in order to make that happen, because he's my only hope. I feel like, because he's a dark man and he would do that.
Thank you for listening to Space Cat's Peace Turtles, and thanks to Ben Prunty for the use of his music. You can find more at benpruntymusic.com and benprunty.bandcamp.com. Pax Magnifica, Bellum Gloriosum.